So in the person-centered approach, first of all, you separate the person from the illness. And in addition to considering the illness, you consider values, preferences, and choices. You consider such things as resilience, which is people's ability to adapt to their circumstances, in illness or in health, to environmental and personal resources, and you think quality of life, not just getting cured. You also prioritize engaging and retaining people in the treatment process, because it's very nice to have nice treatments, but if you can't sell people on them and get them into treatment, they're of no use. The person-centered approach is also not about symptom reduction or solving problems for people. It's more about promoting positive human development to achieve higher quality of life and well-being. This is very important in illnesses that we treat where getting cured is not always the option, but living well is always an option. We're used to talking about disability, but some of us prefer to talk about capability and having that as a starting point. And so when you talk about capability, you talk about individual abilities, but also the enabling socioeconomic environment that fosters multiple options and the freedom to make choices for oneself. This means that in addition to the standard medical treatment or whatever approaches we offer people, we have to think of the larger environment of society and how it can make people's lives better, regardless of the illnesses or the challenges that they face. So in the person-centered approach, I think the key thing that we need to remember, in contrast to the first model I showed you, is that decision-making is shared. So what you have is research evidence, clinical expertise, and patient preferences all being brought in to the clinical encounter to facilitate clinical decision-making. So everyone participates and brings what they have, their knowledge, their experience, to enable a clinical decision that will be acceptable and preferred by the patient. So how is this approach then well suited to treat eating disorders? I think the cartoon says it all, but I'll still explain a little bit just the same. So first of all, we talk about evidence-based treatments, and I put in a little box, but what does this exactly mean? First of all, evidence-based treatments are constantly evolving. There's always new things coming out. But in addition, you have to match them to the person in front of you. We know that eating disorders are heterogeneous. They affect people of all ages, at all stages of life. You may be facing someone who has had the illness when they were younger, did well, and then relapsed, or you may be facing a 7-year-old child who's experiencing the first symptoms. In addition, comorbidity means that no two people are different, are the same actually. I think eating disorders remark themselves by the number of comorbid conditions that frequently occur with them. And so when you're facing someone with an eating disorder, you're often facing someone who also has an anxiety disorder or depression or a personality disorder or a substance abuse problem. And so the treatment has to be tailored to the individual's needs. Finally, there's the whole issue of chronicity and how that affects a person and their experience. There's stigmatization that has to be taken into account. Howard mentioned shame, but that is among the many barriers to treatment are self-stigmatization, when people don't want to go for care because they feel that they will be having to face someone who's going to judge them. And we have to take that into account when we're adopting a person-centered approach. Finally, there's all the consequences and the impairments that go with having an eating disorder. And they affect every sphere of a person's life: social, physical, psychological, occupational, and interpersonal. And unless you're willing and ready to address all the consequences with the interventions, then you're not really responding fully to the needs of the person you're trying to help. So when you talk about a non-coercive, collaborative approach. Most people react to, well, what happens when people don't want to engage in treatment or when they're dangerous and so on. So, people are usually responding to this side of the equation, that people with eating disorders are often caught in a struggle where they don't want to gain weight, they don't want to lose control, they kind of have been sick for a long time, and my anorexia never killed me, my bulimia never killed me. But at the other end of the equation, we know that people with eating disorders are often very scared and want something to be done. Their families want something to be done. They may have goals about improving their relationships, their self-esteem, their depression. They want to function better. And most importantly, they want their obsessions to go away. And so I think that we always have an in, and we always have a way of aligning ourselves with people if we can find what it is for them that's important and a motivator to start working on the problem. So we say we'll take any motivation, whether it's external or internal, as a starting point to working together. And usually it works. So we adopt a very motivational stance, especially for people who are ambivalent. We like ambivalence. We think it's a good thing. No ambivalence is terrible, especially if it's no ambivalence and I don't want any help. The approach is time limited, stepwise and structured, and we carefully choose our non-negotiables. And I hope later on if people want lots of examples. But I think there are three basic pillars to making treatment a success that you have to keep in mind. Preserving patient autonomy as much as possible, but also ensuring safety as much as possible. But keeping in mind that treatments have to be effective. So when you're doing negotiations around people's preferences and things they want to try, we have to listen, we have to let them try, but it's got to work. And there has to be a time limit and clear guidelines as to when you'll know that you're on the right track and what you're doing is working. So we use objective indicators to measure how we're doing, both from the patient's perspective and from our own. And the non-negotiables often help us navigate these three spheres when they collide or there seems to be a conflict, let's say between safety and autonomy, or safety and treatment effectiveness, or autonomy and treatment effectiveness. The final thing about treatment effectiveness too is that we strongly believe that, if you're doing a treatment that doesn't work versus a treatment that does work, you're actually depriving a lot of people who are waiting for the treatment. And so it's always a delicate balance, and there's a lot of ethical discussions, especially when we devised our day treatment protocol. Ethical discussions were the order of the day for a long time. And we didn't just hold them between us as a team, but also with our patients, and that was very, very interesting.